Hey guys, it's me. Yeah, my face is appearing once again in a tutorial because I made a mistake. Yes, today we are painting Teclis, and in the Celennar video what I discussed was that he was primed with Corax White. And whilst he was primed with Corax White, that is correct, the primer, I couldn't rescue it. It was too grainy, it was dusty, and it would really... I started doing Teclis and... yeah, as soon as I started putting the gold on, it was horrible. It was just, it wasn't the kind of quality that you've come to expect, and not the kind of quality that I would hope to provide for a customer or for any of you on here on YouTube. So what had to happen is that Teclis got stripped, and he has then been, you know, marinating in methylated spirits for a little while. You can see it just here. And he is now out of the goop, and he has been primed in Grey Seer. So, yeah. I hope you enjoy this one. He's looking a lot better now, and I'm really excited. Perfect. Hey guys, it's the War Hipster here, coming at you with the second part of the Teclis and Celennar tutorial, and today we are of course painting Teclis. Now he has been freshly primed once again with Grey Seer instead of Corax White because of the aforementioned mistakes, which we shall not discuss any further. But that being said, what we now want to do is we want to actually re-establish that Corax White in some of these areas. And so the first colour we are going to use is Corax White, and we're going to be using this on all of these robes. And we just want to have it thinned down on our palette, and we want to get a good strong coverage of this Corax White all over these robes like this. Just want to brighten it up because we want to start particularly on the robes from a really strong standpoint. What we can do to save ourselves some time in the future, we can also use this as an opportunity to block in with the Corax White these stones that are hanging from his belt. I'm assuming they're stones until someone tells me otherwise. And to also block in all of his armour, as well as his staff up here. And we can also use this as a good opportunity to just do kind of the tips. We don't want to do the whole of the hair. We just want to do kind of about halfway down the hair. We want this bit to stay Grey Seer. We want this bit to be white. So you just want to go around with the Corax White doing this. And with that Corax White applied, what we're now going to do is we are going to focus on those robes. Now the first colour we're going to be using is Aethermatic Blue. And what we want to do is we want to grab some of this Aethermatic Blue on our brush, and we just want to basically paint this all over these robes in these nice big broad brush strokes like this. You want a nice smooth finish on this. You don't want to completely overwhelm all these robes with this colour. And next up, with Teclis now looking aqua fresh, what we're going to do is we're going to make a roughly 10 parts contrast medium to 1 part Talassar Blue mix. And we're going to use this once again all over those robes, like this. And this is just to give us that exact tone that we want in the recesses. Because whilst it might look that we're basically just destroying that Aethermatic Blue layer that we've already put, what we're actually seeing here is the really thin Talassar Blue effectively creating its own new shade over the top of this Aethermatic Blue. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to create a mix of roughly 2 parts Corax White to 1 part Lothern Blue to give us this really lovely warm sky baby blue type thing. And we're going to use this to effectively relayer up all of those robes. But what we want to do is we definitely want to just avoid all of the darkest recesses where that Talassar Blue and Aethermatic Blue has settled. And with that Lothern Blue and Corax White mix applied, what we're now going to do is we're going to use some pure Corax White. And we're going to use this to just highlight all of these robes. So what we want to do is we basically want to pick out all of the sharp edges, like this. And with that done, the robes are now finished and they look awesome. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to paint in his hair. And the colours that we're going to be using, now I've got a lot of pots of paint open, and there is a reason for this. The colours we're going to be using is Apothecary White, Space Wolves Grey, Talassar Blue, Akhelian GReen, and we're going to keep our pot of contrast medium on standby. Because what we are going to do is we're going to do some blending on the model. Now, what we're going to, actually we've got a little bit of a hair in there, just get rid of that first. Right, what we are going to do first is we're going to grab some Apothecary White and we're going to coat this all over the tips of the hair, like this. Now this isn't going to look like it's doing very much, but trust me when I say you absolutely need this. So, just want to make sure that we get this Apothecary White all over, like this. We want to go about 1/3 of the way down, like that. Then what we do is we wash our brush, and then we take some Space Wolves Grey, and around about here we want to pull the Space Wolves Grey and blend it together with the Apothecary White. Like this. We're going to wash our brush every time. We have to bring it back and grab some more. Like that. And then what we want to do is we want to grab our Talassar Blue. And we want to, around here, just start coating this Talassar Blue all over like this, and just pulling it into where that Space Wolves Grey kind of bridges the gap into the Apothecary White. So we want to get this all over here. Like that. And then what we want to do is take a small amount of Akhelian GReen, and just around here at the base, we want to add a little bit more depth to where we've added that Talassar Blue. A little bit more on that side. Not using very much Akhelian GReen. Once again, just around the back. like that. And now what we want to do, you want to grab some contrast medium. And from here, around about halfway where the Talassar Blue starts, just want to start drawing it out into where that Apothecary White and Space Wolves Grey is settled. Just to reinforce that blend up to the white at the end. Once again, wash the brush, grab a little bit more contrast medium, and just start pulling it out. And once all those colours are dry, what we're going to do is we're going to take some thinned down blue horror. And we're going to use this to highlight all of that hair. And we're going to start at the end. And we're just going to start working our way down the strands. Oh, no, that was straight from the pot. We don't want to do that. So we just want to, and I find it's probably a good idea to just do all of the sections at once. So that you don't lose track. Or, alternatively, grab that blue horror and just do a whole strand of hair until you can't do it any longer. And this will take a bit of time. But once you've done, what you'll get is this consistent highlight going all the way through that highlight. And what you want to do is you want to take it to roughly about halfway. So around about here. We want to get really narrow. And next up, with that blue horror all applied to the tips of the hair, we're going to use some Lothern Blue. And we're going to use this to highlight the base of the hair. Where it's a lot darker. And then lastly, with that Lothern Blue applied, what we're going to do is we're going to create a roughly 10 parts contrast medium to 1 part Talassar Blue mix once again. And we're just going to, from the base of the hair, basically take a brush full like this, and from the base of the hair down here, I'm going to make contact with the model, and we're going to pull it all the way out to the end. Like that. And what that'll do is it'll just pull together all of that blend, all of those highlights, and just strengthen out all of the colours. And with that long flowing hair complete, what we're now going to do is we're going to focus on the leather details. And the colour we're going to be using for this is Wyldwood. And so what we want to do is we just want to get a good brush load of this and start slapping this paint all over these details. Now don't worry about the trim of the foot. If you look at the box art, it is going to be gold. But because we're going to cover over that with some Retributor Armour, it'll be fine to get contrast on it. So we just want to go around picking out all of these leather parts. So it's areas like his shoes, his gloves, the scabbard of his sword, his straps, and yeah, places like that. We've also got the areas in there that are holding the armour onto him. And with that done, we're now just going to rattle through a few more base coats. And the first one that we're going to use is we're going to use some Iron Hand Steel, and this is going to be for those silver details. So this is areas like the scale mail, just coming down here off of his armour. Just being real careful when we get close to that lovely blue that we've done. Like that. And we also want to use this Iron Hand Steel for the sword blade. And with that done, we're now going to rattle through all of those warm gold details. And the colour we're going to be using for this is just some thinned down Retributor Armour. Now all the warm gold is not the areas like on the armour. We want areas like the decorative areas on the scabbard, like this, at one end, and similarly again at the other, up there. We also want to colour in the hilt of the sword, like this, including this little bit in here. We also want to do the kind of frame for his headpiece, so this bit around here, and we want to do the little gems and things on his boots and on his gloves, as well as the top of the staff and this large sigil here on his chest. Oh, and also this bit here on his headband. There's a lot of warm gold details, so effectively what you want to do is you want to just look at the box art and follow along for anything that is really like kind of like almost like an orange gold, because that's what we're going to be aiming for. And with that done, what we now want to do is we want to create a roughly 2 parts contrast medium to 2 parts skeleton horde to 1 part Gryph Hound orange mix. And we're going to use this to do all of the half moons around Teclis, so including this big one here. So what we want to do is we don't want to use very much of this mix as we go. We just want to paint in these big broad brush strokes, being very careful not to get any large dark splodges. And just working it into all of those recesses. Like this. So you want to do the ones up here on the top, the one on top of the staff, these two here on the sword, and the one on the bottom of the staff as well. And just take your time with this, because you want these coats to be nice and smooth, like this. And with that done, don't worry too much about doing any highlights yet. We are still just blasting through all of those base coats. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a roughly 2-part Stormhost SIlver mix with some 1 part Retributor Armour. So 2 part Stormhost SIlver, 1 part Retributor Armour mix, and then use a little bit of water just to mix it all together. And what this will give us is this lovely white gold that we used on the Celennar. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to use this to paint in all of the trim on all of his armor panels and any other kind of remaining metallic details. So we want to get all of the armor panels like around here, as well as all of the kind of ornate detailing that you can see across each of these armor panels. So like around here, just going to use the side of my brush to do that. Don't worry if you get any of this on the flat of the panel, because you can just neaten it back up with some Corax White, hence why we did that Corax White right at the beginning, like this. What we also want to do is we also want to get this all over areas like these bits that are holding up the stones, or whatever these things are, like the bits of the trim on the staff. And once that's done, what we now want to do is we want to take some Akhelian GReen, and we want to use this on all of the tassels. Don't worry on the ones on the cloak. If you may have noticed by now, we're ignoring the cloak for now. So what we're just going to do is we want to do this across all of these little hanging tassels on Teclis himself. Similarly, what we don't want to do just yet is the long trailing bit of fabric just there. We just want to ignore that for now and get this Akhelian GReen all over these other areas, like this. And next up, we want to use a teeny tiny amount of Ultramarines Blue, and this is for the sigil on his tummy. Just want to take our time here, because we just want to get this on the sigil. But if you do make a mistake, don't worry. You can always neaten it up a little bit more. with some Corax White. And with that sigil done, don't worry if it looks a little bit too dark, we are going to highlight it back up soon, but we are just continuing with that base coat train. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just paint this long, thin trail of fabric. Now the colours that we're going to be using are Akhelian Green, Talassar Blue, and Contrast Medium. And we want to use all of these at the same time as they get wet, to keep them wet. So what we want to do first is we want to take our Talassar Blue, and we just want to start up here. Maybe a little too much Talassar Blue. Just want to start up here as close as we can to where the fabric starts, and just pull the Talassar Blue out in a nice, smooth brush stroke like that, going all the way across. Similarly again, on this side, starting as close as we can to where it starts, one long coat that Talassar Blue all over. Like this. Just trying to make sure I get the entire of one side done. Like that. Then what we do is we wash the brush off, grab some contrast medium, and then just in reverse from where you started, you make contact with the model and just pull it back the other way, like this, until you get to about halfway. Wash the brush and do it again. Grab another brush load of contrast medium, start at the end and pull it like this. So we're just basically just weakening that colour to get that nice kind of fade out. And keep doing that until you're happy with it. And what you can do is, just without any medium on your brush, just keep pulling it off. And then grab a small amount of Akhelian Green, and at the base of the fabric, just pull it out like that. So you get a much darker through to the mid-tone of the Talassar Blue, like that. And with that done, it's now time to add some shades. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with all this white gold, and we're going to make a roughly 5 parts contrast medium to 1 part Wyldwood mix. And we want to use a small brush here, because what we want to do is we basically, over all of that white gold, want to now apply a recess shade of this Wyldwood mix. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we get all that gold covered, but we also just want to hit the inside recess of all of that gilt edging and stuff that we've added, just to give us a really nice kind of dark brown, well, medium brown shade on the white, like this. So you just want to really take your time here. And we want to go over all of the white gold. Don't worry about the kind of the stuff that we've done with just Retributor Armour just yet. Just going to shade that slightly differently. And next up, we want to create a roughly 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part Gryph Hound orange mix. And we're going to use this on all of that warm gold. Like this. And with that Gryph Hound orange and contrast medium mix applied, what we're now going to do is grab some Gryph Charger grey, and we want to use this on all of the silver. Like this. Getting a good coating of this on that scale mail. as well as on the sword. And with that on, we've got the last of the shades on there. So what we're going to do is we're going to block in the last few base coats. And the colour that we're going to use first is Volupus Pink. And we want to use this for the grip of the Sword of Teclis. And next up, we want to use some Magos Purple. And this is going to be for this kind of magical beach ball that he's got going on down here. Like this. We don't want to use loads of this at a time because we basically just want it to be a really nice soft purple. Bordering on a pink. And with that Magos Purple applied, the next colour we're going to add is some Guilliman Flesh. And this is for his face. Now we want to be really careful around here because a Guilliman Flesh blob on that blue will show up really easily. So we just want to be very careful as we add this in. So don't use loads at once. Like that. And with that done, it's now time to add some highlights to the miniature. And where we're going to start is way back in the process. And we're going to be starting with all of that Wyldwood brown leather that we've got. And the colour we're going to be using is Steel Legion Drab. And what we want to do is we just want to pick out all of the raised areas. On all of the brown. Like this. And with that Steel Legion Drab applied, what we now want to do is want to take a small amount of Karak Stone. We just want to use this to apply a little bit of a spot highlight to the sharpest areas of these highlights that we've just done. So like you can see that I'm doing here, like we just want to like hit the little bit of the ankle, these little areas here, and like I did up there, just want to hit the kind of the apex of those creases in the leather of the boots, and areas like the fingernail, like the knuckles and stuff, and just pick out some of these. With all of that brown leather done, what we now want to do is we want to grab some blue horror. We want to use this to highlight all of those blue tassels that we've got floating around Teclis, like the ones on his legs. We also want to do this big one here, and we're going to use blue horror for all of the highlights. So we're not going to use like a darker one and then a lighter one. We're just using blue horror, so it's all consistent across all of that blue. And with that done, what we're now going to do is we're going to highlight, well, we're going to relayer all of these kind of half moon things. So the colour that we're going to make is roughly 2 parts Wraithbone to 1 part Light Ochre. We want to take a fair amount of this on our brush, and what we want to do is I'll demonstrate it on the big one here. So we basically want to just use this paint all over the flats of these areas, just leaving that recess alone, like that. And next up, what we want to do now is we want to highlight all of those bits, and the colour we're going to use is Wraithbone. And we just want to hit those edges like this. And we don't necessarily want to do the whole of the edge, so as you can see I've just done the top corner there, and I'll do the inside bit here as well, and again on the other side. And this way, if we leave some of that edge, it gives the impression of the light catching off it like that. And with that done, what we now want to do is we're going to highlight the gold. Now, the gold that we're going to do first is in fact this kind of reddy orangey gold that we've done. And the color that we're going to make is roughly 3 parts Liberator Gold to 1 part Retributor Armour. So it's a slightly brighter Retributor Armour. And what we're going to do on all this orange gold is we're effectively just going to relayer that gold up, but we're just going to leave that orange shade in the deepest recesses. So we just want to get a nice shiny gold like that across the flat. So you can see there that I've left it in here and around the gem shaped objects. And with that done, what we now want to do is create a roughly 2 part Stormhost SIlver and 1 part Retributor Armour mix and thin it down with a little bit of water. So the same as we did before with all that white gold, except now what we're going to do is we're going to use this to highlight all of the gold. So we're going to redo all of that white gold that we shaded with the Wyldwood mix, but we're also going to highlight all of that reddy gold that we've just relayered. So we just want to pick out the sharpest areas this time rather than relayering the whole thing like this. Make it really nice and shiny. And with that gold relayered, what we're now going to do is we're going to take some Stormhost SIlver on its own. And we're going to do a couple of things. So firstly, what we want to do is in the center of any of the gems that we are eventually going to cover in purple, we want to just add this Stormhost SIlver right down the middle to make them nice and bright. So we've got the one here on his head, here on the legs, and there's a couple on his hands as well. Don't worry about the ones in his hair for now. We're just doing this bit now just to establish that bright gem like that. And then what we also want to do is we want to use the Stormhost SIlver to highlight all of the silver. So we want to highlight that scale mail, make it nice and bright. And it doesn't have to be a perfect edge highlight. It can almost just be a complete layer if you want it to be, because we want it just to be really, really, really bright and shiny. So like this. And with that Stormhost SIlver applied, all of our metallics are now finished. And so what we're going to do is we're now going to highlight his face. And the colour that we're going to use is some thinned down Flayed One Flesh. And what we want to do is pull our sleeves up, because this is some serious stuff. What we want to do with this Flayed One Flesh is we want to be very careful. And we just want to pick out all of the sharpest areas on his face. So areas like the bridge of his nose, his cheekbones, his eyelids, like this. And with that Flayed One Flesh applied, we're going to take a teeny tiny bit of Wraithbone. And we're going to use this just to highlight the absolutely sharpest points of his face. So like areas like the tip of his nose. But we're also going to use this Wraithbone to paint in the whites of his eyes. Just want a nice steady hand here. We want to place it over the center of his eye like that. So you just want to go around picking out these areas. So like I'm going to do a little highlight there on the top of his eyebrow. Same again on that side. And with that done, we're now going to take a small amount of Leviadon Blue. a really tiny amount on the tip of your brush. And we want to add this to the center of his eyes. Like that. And with his eyes finished, what we now want to do is take a teeny tiny amount of Magos Purple, not very much, just a small amount on a brush. And inside the deepest recesses of the skin, just want to add a little bit of Magos Purple, just to add a little bit of a pinky colour. Like this. As I say, we're not using very much at all, just a little bit here and there. And with that done, the face is now complete. So what we want to do is we want to grab a little bit more of Magos Purple, and we want to use this over the top of all those silver gems that we painted in. Like this. And this will just make the gems, those super shiny gems, just pure, a little bit pearlescent. That'll look really cool. Like that. And next up, we want to use a small amount of Corax White, just on the tops. There's a little highlight to these bright, shiny gems. Like this. We can also use this little bit of Corax White to just provide a small highlight on the beach ball. I don't know what it is, that's why I keep calling it a beach ball. Magical gourd. Just want to do this little bit of Corax White around the inside. And with that done, it's now time to work on the cape that we've been putting off for so long because we're holding him there. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually start with the inside of the cape, and the color that we're going to make is a roughly 2 parts contrast medium to 1 part skeleton horde mix. And now I'm using a medium shade brush for this because I want to be able to do as much of it in as few brush strokes as possible because I want this to be quite smooth. So what I want to do is I want to take this skeleton horde mix, and I want to be very careful now. And I want to go all the way up to here where the recess starts. And I'm just going to start pulling this skeleton horde down in these big broad brush strokes like this. Now, it might take a couple of coats of this to get it to where you want it to get to. So I'm probably going to do 1 or 2. I'm not entirely sure yet. It really depends on the mixture that you use with the skeleton horde. But you just want to be very careful as you do it when you get close to Teclis, because you're using a big brush. Of course, you could use a smaller brush if you wanted. And with our first layer of that contrast medium and skeleton horde mix applied, we're now going to do the second layer. And this is just to really strengthen up that colour. So once again, just want to be very careful as we apply this. We just want to use these really big, broad brush strokes. Like this. And with that second layer of skeleton horde and contrast medium applied, what we now want to do is we want to make a roughly 6 parts contrast medium to 1 part Wyldwood mix. And we're going to use this as basically a recess shade. So we don't want to use loads at a time. What we want to do is we want to just basically pick out the deepest parts of this cloak. So, and we want to start it kind of wherever it's possible to start it. I'm going to start it just up here. And I'm just going to make contact inside that recess, like that. And I'm just going to pull this Wyldwood mix down like that. And with that done, what we now want to do is highlight all the sharpest areas of that cape with some Wraithbone. And don't worry if it appears really stark at first, because Wraithbone does dry a lot darker and it will blend in a lot more. And with that Wraithbone highlight applied, what we now want to do is we want to take a small amount of Pallid Wych Flesh and we want to add this to the sharpest areas of those highlights. So areas like there where the corners are all meeting up, like that, and like around here as well. And this is just to give a little bit more variation in that highlight tone. And then lastly, for the internals of the cloak, what we're going to do is we're going to create a roughly 10 parts contrast medium to 1 part Aggaros Dunes to create this really thin sort of brown glaze, like that. And we're going to use this over all of that cloak. We just want to, and what this will do is just tie all of our colours together whilst adding a little bit more warmth to the flats of where that skeleton horde is. Like this. And with that, the inside of the cloak is now finished. You can see we've got this lovely different tones in there, and it just looks brilliant. So what we're going to do now is we're going to flip him over and we're going to paint the outside of the cloak. Now, the first colour we're going to use is Space Wolves Grey. And what we want to do is we want to use our medium shade brush once again, because we want quite a lot of this. And we're just going to take the Space Wolves Grey and we're going to make contact as close as we can to all that gold. And then we're just going to start pulling it down in these big broad brush strokes once again. Like this. And with all that Space Wolves Grey applied to his cloak, what we're now going to do is going to create a roughly 6:1 mix of contrast medium and Ultramarines Blue. And we're now going to go over the entire of that cloak with this colour. And the reason we got the contrast medium in there, so we get lots of nice control over it, like this. And it's going to take a couple of coats to do this because we want it to be a really strong blue colour. And the reason we're not going straight down to like Leviadon Blue, for example, is that we're going to be using that as a glaze afterwards to do the really deep shading. So you just want to take your time here, making sure that this is nice and even. And as I said, this might take a couple of coats. It definitely will take a couple of coats. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. So just take your time, get a nice smooth finish on it. The contrast medium definitely helps here, but also just use those big broad brush strokes that we often talk about here at War Hipster Paints with this to get it nice and consistent, as you can see, like this. Now what I've done is I've added 4 layers of that Ultramarines Blue and contrast medium mix, and as you can see we've got this really lovely deep shading. But what we want to do is, much like we did when I did my Blood Angels Outriders tutorial, is these large open spaces, what we want to do is we want to kind of smooth them out a little bit. And what we're going to do is, because we've used so much Ultramarines Blue, we've now got it to the tone where we want it to be. We're going to flatten these off by creating a roughly 10 parts contrast medium to 1 part Kantor Blue glaze. And we're going to use this all over the flats of the cloak. And as you can see there, it's perfectly matching that tone that we're going for. We just want to avoid the darkest recesses where the Ultramarines Blue is settled. And this glaze is so thin that what it does is it basically just makes all of the colour consistent whilst not kind of destroying too much of that kind of contrast paint that we've added. And as I say, we just want to avoid all those recesses where we've added this paint. So we just want to go around like this. And next up, once that Kantor Blue glaze is now dry, what we want to do is we want to take some thin down Alaitoc Blue. And we're going to use this, not very much at a time. You want to thin it down maybe a little bit more than normal. And what we want to do is we want to use this to highlight all of the sharp edges and raised details in the cloth. Like this. And with those Alaitoc Blue highlights applied, what we now want to do is we want to take some thin down Teclis Blue. And we want to use this as a much narrower highlight for the top of all those Hoeth Blue ones that we've just, not Hoeth Blue, Alaitoc Blue that we've just done. So we just want to basically, very carefully, run some of this Teclis Blue down the centre of each of these highlights. Like this. We don't want to cover the whole highlight, just the sharpest points. And next up, once all that Teclis Blue is dry, what we want to do is we want to use a small amount of Blue Horror. And we just want to use this to pick out really small, sharp little details in the cloak. So we just want like areas like where all these folds meet, like there, and around here, and around here. So it's just to give the impression of the light catching on these little areas just before we do the final adding of the depth. And with that Blue Horror applied, all that's left to do is to tie all of those highlights together. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a roughly 8 parts contrast medium to 1 part Leviadon Blue mix. And we're going to use this to glaze all over the top of all of that blue cloak. And it's nice and thin, and what you'll see is it just brings down those highlights and strengthens up that darker blue. Like this. You see? So you just want to go all over all of that blue like this. And so with that done, the blue of the cloak is now finished. It's still drying at the moment, but we can move on. Because what we want to do now is we want to neaten up all these tassels as well as the hem of the robe, the little bar that you can see going around. And the colour we're going to be using for this is Corax White. And you just want to be really, really, really careful here. But what we want to do, as I said, is we're just neatening up all of these tassels, because we've almost definitely gone and got paint all over them, either from when we did the inside of the cloak or the outside of the cloak. And what we also want to do is we want to use this Corax White to run it along that decorative edge. And with that Corax White applied, what we now want to do is we want to take some Akhelian GReen and we want to use it on all of those tassels. Just being careful not to get it on that hem of that robe, on that white bit. But if you do, it's very easy just to neaten it back up with a bit of Corax White. And with those Akhelian GReen tassels all coloured in, what we're now going to do, just before we highlight them, is going to take some Space Wolves Grey. And we're going to use this on the star pattern around the moon. shaped objects like this inside this design. Again, just being very careful when we get close to that hem of that robe. And with that Space Wolves grey applied, we want to take a small amount of Skeleton Horde and use this over the top of the half moon. Like that. And with that done, what we want to do now is we want to highlight those tassels with some blue horror. Just picking out the sharp edges, for example on the knot, and just one or two of the strands. Just add a little bit of this blue horror to the bottom. Like that. And there you have it, part 2 in the books. Teclis is now finished, and so the whole of Teclis and Celennar is complete. You just have to, there's not much to say other than what an amazing miniature to work with. I love it. I hope you love it too. Enjoy. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support me further like these legends on the screen, you can do so. Head to patreon.com/warhipster or go to ko-fi.com/warhipster. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, do all that good stuff. And if you want to be kept up to date, make sure to click the bell icon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.